Bruce was actually already an emergency backup speaker before the world went to shit. And he approached us at the end of the February event, I think, and asked if we would be interested in having him present, and agreed to do it this month, and then agreed to do it online this month. So we're really, really excited to hear what he's going to say. For those of you who know me, you know I am absolutely terrible at introducing speakers. I am much better at letting them introduce themselves. But before I hand over to Bruce, let me remind you how to ask questions. So feel free to ask questions during this, and tag at NerdEvie on WhatsApp with a question for Bruce, and that'll make it just easier for us to pick out questions if there's a whole load of chat going on. I mean, maybe it's all silent. This is very odd. Right, Bruce, do you want to press the buttons that give you control of the screen? And I'm going to sit back in my armchair. I'm wearing slippers as well. It's amazing. Yeah, over to you, Bruce.
Thanks very much. Oh, hang on. You have to stop sharing, and then we'll be fine. Louise, you need to stop sharing. Oh, there we go. Fabulous. And now I can share my screen, which I'll share that one. Is that sharing? It should be sharing. There we go. How's that? You seeing that? Can you see that?
I can see good. Yes, all working.
Yes?
Yeah.
We good?
Whoa.
Are we good? Fabulous. Terrific. Hello, well, I'm Bruce. And I'm face blind. And a lot about face blindness in the last 4 years since I had it. Than I knew even existed. So what is prosopagnosia, which is the other word, the posh name for face blindness? Well, it's from the Greek. So it's face blindness. It's not the same as, oh, I'm really shit with names, or I can never remember to do with damage. It's just, if you feel behind your ear, just the soft bit there, about an inch in from there, is where the bit that deals with facial recognition is. And what we have, the problem we have is that we can't attach a memory to a face. So the way you recognize someone is not necessarily by identifying them, but it's by the associations and the emotions that face brings to you. It's really difficult trying to explain it to somebody who doesn't have it. Here are a few different ways to try and explain it. So if I showed you 4 apples, which are all quite, I mean, if you see these 4 apples, they're all quite different. And if I then took them away and then waited an hour and then showed you one of these apples, you would have difficulty remembering which one, whether it was number 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's the kind of problem we have with faces. I actually have a thing about dinner parties and things like that, where I've been talking to people for hours and then I walk away from the table and then meet them somewhere else and then don't recognize them at all. It's very embarrassing. But faces are the most recognizable thing about us. I mean, obviously fingerprints are very important too, but if I showed you 4 hands, you wouldn't probably know who they were. Although ironically, one of the people here actually did recognize one of the hands, the one on the right, which belongs to Nelson Mandela, just from their hands. There is a another very good way of explaining it, which is with upside down imagery, which is that the brain processes various different bits of the face. So it'll process ears, hair, eyebrows, nose, eyes, and mouth, all independently, and try and put it all together. And then that creates, turn that upside down and fiddle with it a bit, then you don't instantly recognize who people are. If you're good at faces, you will know who those people are straight away. If you're okay with faces, you might have to squint at them a bit and check. But if I turn them the right way up, you should, if you're not prosopagnostic, recognize who those 4 guys and woman are immediately. There's another way of explaining this and how the brain processes independent pieces of your face. So I probably don't need to tell you who that is. Most people, when I show that picture, they say it's Adele. But if I turn that particular picture the other way up, it looks nothing like Adele. And the reason why is because you're processing the eyes, which are the right way up in the left-hand picture, and the lips, which are the right way up in the left-hand picture. But then your brain just gets completely confused, and those independently identified pieces of face just don't work. Another way of describing it is, this is my favorite one, is, you know, when you smell something and you go, oh, that reminds me of a party I went to, or a person, or a thing I did. So that smell triggers memories and emotions in your brain that are latently in there. Imagine, however, that you could smell those things and they meant absolutely nothing to you. They just were just a smell. That's kind of what it is. It's not that we don't see faces. We see faces fine. We just don't put it all together. And that's because of brains. This is a picture of looking down from above at someone's brains. And the fusiform gyrus, can you see my arrow moving there? I hope you can. So the fusiform gyrus is the bit of the brain that recognizes faces. There's also the parahippocampal gyrus here, which does other things as well. And one of the things that does is it's good for location. So for example, if you damage that part of your brain, you can actually get completely lost in it quite quickly. For example, and you find a lot of people with face blindness suffer with what's called topographic agnosia. You have prosopagnosia and topographic agnosia. So I can be in a meeting in a large office, go to the loo, and get totally lost trying to find my way back to the same meeting. If you find that you have problems with locating, that may be something else that tips you off that you might be prosopagnostic. So these are the bits, the little red bits there. There is another piece on the left-hand side, but we're not really that sure about exactly how that works as well. But the bit that researchers are working on at the moment is the red bit on the right-hand side. There are two types of prosopagnosia. So maybe you're born with it. If you are born with it, it's called developmental. You have it from birth. It probably runs in your family. Your mother or siblings or various different relatives may have it as well. You may not even know that you've got it. You may go through your whole school experience really uncomfortable because you can't remember who your schoolmates were. And they will, and then you eventually get out the other side and you don't recognize who your friends at university are. You find it very difficult to make friends because you can never remember who people are. There's things like that. There's the other way, which is the way I got it, which is you can acquire prosopagnosia. So I had a stroke 4 years ago, and that basically damaged my brain. Luckily, it just left me with topographic agnosia and prosopagnosia. So apart from that, I'm quite high functioning and have a very good memory. So I can rely on my memory massively for all sorts of things now. So how do you know whether you're proso? If you're watching this, it may be that there's something that I'm about to say that makes you go, that's me, I do that. So one of the most obvious ones, and this is the way I discovered that I had prosopagnosia, is you confuse characters in movies or on TV. It's very easy these days, especially with male character actors who have like short dark hair and double, and they all look the bloody same because they're all wearing the same clothes. But my favorite films are things like Marvel Universe things because they're all wearing costumes, or animation because they all look different. The way I found out that I had proso was after I had my stroke, which I actually didn't know I was having a stroke, but I did. When I came back, I started continuing to watch, I think it was series 4 of Game of Thrones. And I suddenly realized that all the characters had the same voices, but I didn't recognize any of them. It's like they changed the whole cast of Game of Thrones, but kept the same voices. It was very weird. When you aren't expecting to see somebody, you don't really, this can be really embarrassing. You can blank really close friends, members of your family. It can be very, very awkward. There's a way of coping with it, which is you try and remember a hairstyle or something they're wearing, or a bit of jewelry, or maybe have a mole or a limp or one arm. There's ways that you can tell people apart that aren't to do with their face, anything except their face. I have difficulty recognizing myself in photographs, but I actually find the mirror thing fine. But there are people worse than me who don't recognize themselves in mirrors. This is a very good coping strategy. Anybody who even smiles at you on the street, you just smile and wave back and say, hi, how are you? And hope that they'll actually say something that reminds you of who the hell they are. And you don't use their name. This is another really difficult one. If somebody changes the color of their hair or gets a new hairstyle, because you're used to seeing them with long red hair and suddenly it's like short and white, then no idea who they are. And context is really, really important. And I'll tell you a story about this in a minute. So anybody out of context, I walk my dog regularly in London, and I have frequently blanked people that I've known for years walking their dogs in the park because they don't have a dog on a lead when they're in Sainsbury's or on the tube. You can be very confused. You can feel guilty. They're embarrassing. It can really knock you for six as far as confidence is concerned, because you don't want to talk to someone because you just don't think you can recognize who they are, and you kind of stay away from people. Also, you might think that you recognize somebody, but actually you're not sure, so you don't take that extra step, and that can, like, he's a rude bastard, you know, he's just blanked me again. I kind of nod at him, and he just nods back, but he doesn't remember that we went to school together or something. If you're quite severely prosopagnostic, and I showed you these three pictures, you wouldn't be able to tell which one of them I was. It could be that I'm Fidel Castro or Eric Cantona, but it's more likely that I'm one on the left, because that's the one I took the picture with. And I can recognize myself in that because I know that hat, and that's basically and the scarf and the coat, and I took the picture. So that's how I know that that's me. But if somebody else took the picture and I wasn't wearing my own clothes, I might have trouble. There are some quite well-known prosopagnostics. The man who mistook his wife for a hat, author Oliver Sacks, he was quite severely prosopagnostic. He didn't recognize any of his patients. People telling anybody who listen, frankly, that he's prosopagnostic, because it helps him to get away with blanking people that he really ought to talk to. Stephen Fry had prosopagnosia. Apple, Steve Wozniak didn't recognize. Well, why would you recognize Steve Jobs apart from the black polo neck? So anyone wearing a black polo neck is probably Steve Jobs. So it's fine. Jane Goodall said that she recognized apes better than she recognized people. He's recently come out as being prosopagnostic. There's loads of them. It's a very, very good excuse if you ever want to apologize for blanking someone. There are some cracking stories that go with this, though. I don't know whether I should read these out. I don't know what sort of size of thing you have. I might as well read them out, because if you're looking at it on a phone, it's going to be quite small for you to actually read this. So I'll read it out quickly. So this was a chap who was calling at the home of my teenage daughter's friend to pick up my daughter. He asked the wrong girl if she was ready to come home. Can be a bit embarrassing. I thought my neighbor was my girlfriend. That was nearly quite awkward. That was actually me. It was only when she talked to me and I realized that she had a French accent that I realized it wasn't her. I collected the wrong child from nursery. Happens quite a lot. Also, things like if you're a teacher and you're a prosopagnostic, you have to make sure that all the children sit in exactly the same seats every single time you see them. Otherwise, you won't know who the hell they are. This actually happens quite a lot, which is people flirting with strangers who turn out to be their spouses. I love this one. A surgeon gave me a colonoscopy. It was only when I read his name that I realized it had been my friend's husband who'd put a camera up my bum. And this is my favorite one of all. I met with my business coach recently. I've been working with him virtually for over a year. At the coffee shop, I texted him to tell him my proso, so it'd be helpful if you could find me. I told him I was wearing a purple top. He texted back to say he was colorblind. Not great. So how can you tell if you're colorblind? Not colorblind, if you're face blind or not? Well, you can take a test. Researchers love testing people. So if you talk to a researcher, they'll put you through various different tests. These are the sorts of images that you'll see when you do the test. They tend to just do away with the hair. So you have to rely on things like eyebrows and lips and nose shape. And that's kind of how you cope with recognize. What they do is they show you one picture and then they'll show you a bunch of other people and say, pick out the one that you've just seen. And it's quite difficult. Don't bother telling your doctor because they have no idea what the hell prosopagnosia is. As I said, it's only been going since 1947. So doctors haven't really been trained in it properly. They'll send you to a specialist or to a researcher. What the researcher will do is they'll either do a brain scan or they'll do an eye tracking exercise, or they'll show you these pictures with the hair missing. Sometimes they'll do a thing called a famous faces test. So they'll take all the hair off a famous face. There are 18 famous people here. When I first did this test, I scored 3. I had no idea who all but 3. I think I got Fred Astaire, Paul McCartney, and oh God, who else did I get? Donald Trump, probably. But and even now, if I look at this picture, I have got no idea who most of those people are. And I've been told who they are. It's very, very unfortunate. So we talked about the brain injury, the fact that it can be an issue. Can it be cured? No, it can't be cured. Once you've got it forever, unfortunately. You can cope with it, though. So we've talked about some of the coping strategies like hair, clothes, the way somebody walks or moves, whether they're tall, short, fat, thin. You stand double the chance of getting who they are right if there's a couple. As I said, eyebrows are very important. Context is also important. But for me, the really triggers the emotions in the memories is the voice. I'm really good with listening to a voice and go, I know who that voice is. And I've had to train myself to be like that. But it's quite something when you just hear a voice, and that voice to me is like that smell that it evokes that occasion or that person. There are some pretty obvious ones. Name tag. It's brilliant. It's so good. And you can also, what's very handy is a prompter. So if somebody's walking by your side, like royalty or a politician, who'll say, that's the person that you met at such and such a thing, and they've got their daughter's called so and so. A prompter is brilliant. I'm very lucky that my girlfriend actually is very good at this. And the reason she's good at this is, and this is the only chart, I promised only one chart. So the way it works, this is based on the Oxford face-blind test, sorry, the Cambridge face-blind test. And so this is the test without the hair. And the prosopagnostics is the 2.2% on the left who don't recognize people's face. But there are the antithesis of those people who are super recognizers. The police use these people. And I'm very fortunate that my girlfriend is a super recognizer. We were standing on a train platform once, and on the other side of the platform was a person, and she said, I was at school with that person when I was 7, and she was right. It's amazing. What super recognizers can do is quite staggering. So that's pretty much it. I hope I've got through it in about the right amount of time. And thank you very much. And I'm very happy to listen to any questions that you may have. And thank you.
Excellent. Oh, that was wonderful. I'm going to give Evie a couple more seconds to read through the WhatsApp. I have to say, I think I'm probably somewhere on the left of that spectrum. My dad has logged in tonight, partly because he was super interested in this talk, because he thinks he has this. I find it really difficult at Nerd Nite seeing people who I know come every month or come many months, and especially when it's people who've actually presented at Nerd Nite, and I'm just like, hi, you're a person I think I might know. So I just go around with a big smile on my face. How
are you?
Occasionally I go up to people who I'm like, oh my God, I'm really sorry. I know that you spoke at Nerd Nite once. I'm terrible with faces. And they're like, no, I haven't spoken at Nerd Nite yet. So yeah, it's, but Susie, who is on the team, was for a while identifying herself as a super recognizer. She has now said that she's drunk that skill away. Unfortunately. So at one point we were able to balance each other out, but no. So Evie, have we got any questions coming in from the WhatsApp? Have we got Evie?
We do. First of all, we have a massive virtual applause. We have virtual applause in WhatsApp from several people. So imagine that. First question is, when you have those boxes that you can tick, do you have to tick all of them to recognize that person?
No.
You have to tick the box for all the signs.
No, it can't. I mean, literally, I can recognize someone without looking at them because I hear their voice. Similarly, if I'm standing behind somebody, but I know the way they stand, I can recognize somebody that way. So there are various other ways apart from facially that I can recognize people.
Excellent.
Can I just say this is the first time I've ever given this talk?
Excellent. There was a question from Chris, by the way. I didn't introduce him. Next question comes from Niguel, and he asks, in a recent David Attenborough documentary, a father albatross couldn't recognize its offspring when it fell mere inches out of its nest, so refused to help it get back into the nest. Then, when the chick managed to crawl back into the nest, the father became all paternal again. Does this mean albatrosses are proso?
There's always a very good answer to questions that you don't know the answer to, and that's I don't know the answer to that. I would guess though with that it's more about the smell and the pheromones coming off the chick rather than about the actual look of the chick, because they must be really, really difficult.
I did see that documentary, and it is heartbreaking, really. Next question comes from there's no name, but the question is, does this normally come with any other neurological challenges?
Yes, it does. It can come with several. The one I had that it comes as a happy meal with topographic agnosia. So I once went out on a motorcycle and I got lost for maybe an hour and a half, and this is between Shoreditch and Camden, and I was on a motorcycle, and it took me an hour and a half to get home. It was just crazy. I was just so lost. But other things are things like, I mean, there are extremes where people with prosopagnosia actually see people as cartoons. They actually see their faces almost like a line drawing. There are people who don't recognize things like houses or cars. Because the piece of your brain that is to do with faces is very close to the area that distinguishes color, sometimes it can distort the colors that you see as well.
We have a couple more questions if we have to, please.
Yep.
So next question comes from Nick. Is not being able to put names to faces a different problem? I know the face, but I can't place it.
It sort of is part of the same thing, but not really. It's more that you don't remember, you don't recognize the person. So if you, I'm quite good with names. So I can remember people's names really well, but putting that name to a voice is okay. Putting that name to a face is a bit tricky.
A follow-up question to that is there any equivalent for names?
Yeah, it's called being lazy and having a poor memory.
Right.
Don't insult the
our
guest.
Our last
But seriously, if you want to remember people's names, there are tricks that you can do to remember people's names, but they are not anything to do with brain damage. They're much more to do with memory.
Our last question comes from Emma. Mistaking partner for stranger and flirting with them, does that mean at least that your partner is your type? I
guess. I mean, I once went out to the pub and we sat down and went to the loo, came back, sat down, put my arm around her and said, "Do you fancy a bite to eat?" And this woman said, girlfriend was at the table behind her. So I just assumed it was her, which is why my girlfriend now wears this purple scarf everywhere. Unfortunately, my girlfriend is now stuck in Colombia for the foreseeable future. So I'm having to really rely on every way I can possibly think of to recognize people.
That
Questions for
Thank you.
Chris.
that was brilliant. Thank you so much.